Hello, my name is Taylor. I am a financial coach, and I'm going to be talking to you guys how to use Monarch Money to track reimbursable expenses, whether it's just out with friends and they're reimbursing you for stuff when you're going out, or if it's work-related reimbursable expenses. There's a lot of different ways to handle this in Monarch, so I'm going to walk you through a couple of the scenarios that you could decide which one is correct for you, and what has worked with my clients. So first off, the most common one is just sending Venmo or Zelle payments back and forth after an expense. So you went to Costco with a friend, they are paying you for half of their expenses or whatever portion of their expenses they accrued, and you're just getting a Venmo back for that. Same if you went out with friends, it's just Venmos back and forth after every single transaction and every single expense. It's normally just a small Venmo back and forth. This is something where I think it is most appropriate to categorize it as the exact same category as the original charge was. So if the charge was categorized as groceries, the reimbursement should also be groceries. And the reason for this is if you categorize that as income, then that way at the end of the year when you're looking at, hey, how much did I spend on groceries or how much did I spend on dining out? It's going to be very inflated, right? Because the data in Monarch is not going to count the reimbursement. So it's going to look like you spend, an average of $300 on every grocery shopping trip when in reality, you're only spending $150. Same with going out. If you're always the one that's swiping the card, maybe you're getting the points and all your friends are reimbursing you. You don't want to show month over month how large your restaurant bill is, because that wouldn't be totally accurate. So if you categorize it as the exact same category as the original charge, this is going to get you better data at the end of the year of how much you actually spent. So a true value of your actual expenses. One thing to know is that if you do not connect your Venmo to Monarch, it's really important to make sure you are sending the reimbursement from Venmo. You receive it in Venmo, you send it to your bank account as soon as possible so that things can get categorized correctly and you don't have to send lump payments of if you collected all of this, you'd be sending $200 back to Venmo. You'd have to split the transaction to make it accurate, and it's just a pain in the butt. So if you're using Venmo and not connecting it to Monarch, make sure you never leave a balance in Venmo. You just send it to your bank account as soon as you get the reimbursement. If you do have your balance in Venmo, if you do have that connected to Monarch, you can ignore that advice and watch the video on handling Venmos, because there's going to be a duplicate transactions once you connect the Venmo. And so there's a video on how to handle that, but the same principle applies when you get the Venmo reimbursement. Categorize it as the exact same as the expense. This can be true also with rent. Like if you are splitting rent with a roommate and you're the one that's actually sending it to the landlord, you would do the same thing in Monarch. You're not going to count your roommates half of the rent as income necessarily, unless you are a landlord, unless you are actually, you're supposed to be tracking your income that you're receiving from this, you're paying taxes on that. That's a different situation. But if you're just splitting expenses and they're reimbursing you for a split expense, then go ahead and categorize it as the exact same, again, same principle, exact same category as the original charge that it came from. Now, if you are doing this method with a long-term committed partner, you are sending Venmos back and forth for every little expense that you have, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me if that's how you're doing it, because I need to help you. We need to get you to stop doing that. If you're in a long-term committed relationship, there are easier ways to have separated bills, separate expenses, have your independence without having to send Venmos back and forth. But that is for long-term committed people. You can still have your independence and not have to have this nightmare. If you're just doing this between friends and there's a charge every once in a while, keep doing this. This is great. But if you're sending Venmos back and forth multiple times a week to the same person, we might need to chat. So let me know, is that what you're doing? Is it working for you? Am I wrong? Are you looking for another solution? I'd love to do a video on it. So just let me know. Now, sometimes you are collecting reimbursements from friends, family, or your partner in Monarch, and you want to, and it's one lump sum that they're reimbursing you for, but it's to reimburse you for multiple expenses. So if your partner's budget and this is if it is related to your partner, but if your partner's budget is not connected to Monarch, this is how you're going to handle it. So same thing if you have a roommate that's paying you for just a set amount of things and you guys are splitting this expense. Again, you're not a landlord, you're not collecting income off of this, you're just splitting expenses. What you can do is, instead of taking that reimbursement, so you receive the reimbursement and it's for a whole bunch of different things, instead of trying to split this every single time, and again, I'll show you how to split real quick. So if I received reimbursement income, I could split this in Monarch and I could assign it to each of the categories. So rent, utilities, groceries, everything that they reimburse me for. But if you were doing this multiple times a week or multiple times a month or even any level of recurring, like I don't really love handling split transactions. I think it's tedious. I think it takes a while for you to get to it because you can't split it while it's pending. And it's just annoying to keep track of. But you can do this. This is totally optional if you want to. You receive the reimbursement, you split it out to different categories, totally can do that and follow that first step that I showed you on how to categorize those expenses. Otherwise, if you don't want to do the splitting of expenses, what I would do is create an income category. So in the income section, I would create a category for reimbursement income, and I would just collect that all into the income category. But that does mean that you are going to be budgeting the full amount here, meaning in your budget, you are going to be recognizing you are spending $2,000 of rent, $200 utilities, $500 for groceries. Like you, especially if you are in a partnership, that means that you are still managing the household finances. Even if they're just reimbursing you for it, you're the one that's paying attention to the budget. You have a cap on household expenses like, hey, we got to maintain groceries. I know you're paying me for half, but we've hit our limit of, what our household needs. If you want more groceries, you're going to have to reimburse me for more, right? Because it's going to be out of my budget, right? So that's something to be aware of is yes, your expenses will be a little inflated. However, this could be just a lot easier to manage. And you can still separate out what you got for that reimbursed expenses. Now, I would make sure that this does not mix when you have the reimbursement income, and you're labeling at this. I would not mix this with any other source of reimbursement because I would be tracking, hey, at the end of the year, if I wanted to review my expenses, I know I collected several $1,000s of reimbursement income and I paid about this much. Did it equal to about half? If I took this amount, subtracted it from the total amount I spent here, is it about half or whatever percentage you guys are splitting at? Maybe it's a 30-70 or whatever it is for you guys. Make sure that still makes sense every month, and you can do that math a little bit easier if you split this out. But if you're mixing it with any other person's reimbursement income, it can be really hard to figure out if that split is still equitable for you guys. And so make sure that if you're doing this method, it is just you create a separate income category for that specific deal that you've set with that person. Let me know what you feel like is the hardest part about this method if you are accepting a lump sum reimbursement from your partner or roommate or whoever. Let me know in the comments what you think is the hardest part about managing that in Monarch, and maybe I can touch on that, so let me know. Now, this method is also very similar to how I would also treat work reimbursement expenses. So a lot of my clients have jobs where they have to pay for the expenses out of pocket and they are reimbursed by their employer. So I would make a very similar situation. There's two ways to handle this, and I'll go through why you'd want to do each of them. So in this situation, if you were to do, I would make a category for your reimbursable expenses, and I would just do that right here by going into your settings, going to categories, and I would create a work reimbursable expense category. This is things that you want to be tracking, all charges that you should be getting reimbursed for. I normally put this just in an other section. However, if this is only true if it's fairly automated when you get reimbursed, like you have a system with your employer, maybe it's just like an app on your phone, and it's fairly streamlined process to get your reimbursements. If that's the case, you can keep it down here. If it is something you need to manually apply for, like you have to go submit paperwork, it's a whole tedious process, you could put it up for months and forget about it, then you want to take this category and put it all the way to the top of wherever you need to see it. This is a to-do item. It's a very important to-do item. Put it at the top of whatever you need to see on your budget, so it is front and center. But really, as long as you have a category for this, you're going to be able to track these reimbursable expenses. And then the other thing you would do is create, like I said, a reimbursable income category. So in this case, this is a work one. And so every time I get reimbursed for expenses, I would put that here. Now, if your paychecks are lumped in with your reimbursements, I do recommend, even though I just said I hate splitting stuff, if that is the case, I would split your paychecks. I would look at your pay stub, see what portion was reimbursable versus a paycheck, and I would split that out so that you can make sure that you do not mentally consider your paycheck larger than it actually is, and to make sure you're actually getting reimbursed for all the charges throughout the year. Now, it's very common for employers to lag, or there's a time lag between the expense and the reimbursement to be received. And so if that's the case, it's not going to be an easy month-to-month thing for you. There's going to be some months where you have a lot of money in the reimbursement income and not a lot of expenses, and vice versa. And so that is something to be aware of. If that is the case for you, there is a lot of time between the expense and the reimbursement. I would use this strategy to track expenses and to track income. If it's fairly quick and easy, you generally get it within a month of the expense, I would actually just create a category for reimbursable expenses, label it as even the reimbursement as work reimbursable expenses, and I'll show you why. All right, in this situation, I have $400 of reimbursement income, and then all the way at the bottom, I have my reimbursable expenses here, and it looks like I've charged $700, but this month, maybe I only got $400. Maybe it's because it was a reimbursement for last month's charges, and so we are going to be a little short, right? If I were to assign this $400 to this category right here, then it would be a little short. However, what I would do in these situations is I want you to be tracking this. I want you to be paying attention to this stuff. And if you are living in a very close to paycheck, like there's no surplus and you have to be really mindful of money coming in and money coming out, this reimbursable expenses are really, really hard to deal with because you don't have a surplus. If you go over in reimbursable expenses, you don't get it back very quickly, it can really put you in a bind. And so if that's the case, you might have to take what I'm doing with a grain of salt here and kind of see if this is going to actually work for you. If you have a little bit of buffer room and it's okay to have a little bit of lag between paychecks and reimbursable expenses, what you can do is there's an option recently where you can exclude this category from the budget, meaning like it's not going to take into consideration that expense anymore. And it's not going to be part of our budget. But if you click on it, it is still going to show up and you're going to still see the expenses. And that can be really helpful when you are dealing with a huge lag. Now, the thing to know is that it's still going to show up in your income report. And so you're still going to see $700 worth of expenses, and it's going to be that reimbursable expense right there. And so if that is that is something that we want, because we do want to see, hey, I do have an actual expense occurring. It might not be in my budget, so I'm not way off track of my budget, which can be really satisfying. So you're not, making, stressing out that you're not on track there. But in the cash flow, you still do want to see that, hey, I have $700 of expenses and my reimbursement income is not covering that. And so that is something to be aware of when you do this. I almost like this method better than just hiding the transaction, and you can hide the transactions from your budget manually rather than doing it on the category level like I just showed you. You can hide it just each transaction instead. But what that does, I'll show you real quick, is it also hides it from the cash flow report. And that can be, again, pros and cons to both. You can decide which one you prefer. And again, it comes back to the data that you need to see in order to make decisions. But if you need to see how much expenses you actually had to pay attention to make sure you're actually getting those reimbursements, that can be a little difficult. But it is nice because, I only hid one of those transactions rather than on the account level. And so you can still see it in the budget as well. It's still a budgeted expense. Now, if you were to be getting your reimbursements fairly regularly, there's another way to do this, and that is actually just categorizing the reimbursement as the same, just making a reimbursement expenses and categorizing the reimbursement as the same category. So all of these would just be labeled as reimbursable expenses. I'm going to unhide this section so you can see what that does to the expenses. So now you'll see here, I have $700 of reimbursable expenses. I received $400 of that. And so this can be really helpful to make sure that you're actually getting your reimbursements, because now it's saying, hey, I have a to-do of I need to still get $300 back. And this can be really helpful for if you have roommates, or if you are doing this in a roommate situation as an example, or if you are it's a work-related expense and you have to manually go enter these and it needs to be a to-do item for you. I would recommend doing this to make sure you're tracking down the funds and making sure you're getting those funds. I would just categorize the expense and the income in the same category. And what that does in your cash flow report is the same thing. It's only showing you have $300 of expenses. It's taking that $700 of expenses minus the reimbursement, and it's putting that in here. So That way I don't have inflated income as well. Everything is just like you're trying to zero this out. And eventually at the end of the year, when you're looking at your years of expenses, you'd hope to see that you have everything reimbursed and you don't even see reimbursable expenses on here because it was a net zero. So it really does come down to the data you need to see. How is categorizing, hiding, moving funds around? How is it going to help you make decisions in your personal finances? If you need to see that data, absolutely get to it. Make sure you can, it's in a visual way that makes sense for you. You can go use any of the scenarios I just showed you. If you don't need to see it, you can hide a lot of this stuff. You can just remove it from the budget, but if it's going to throw off the way you're budgeting, and it's going to throw off your cash flow, like how much money is in your bank account, it might put you in a bind. Handling reimbursed expenses is really, really important. And especially as you're getting used to Monarch, you're using it for a year. I want you to be able to look back at 2023 and get an accurate report of what your actual expenses are, actual income is. Make sure things are equitable and with your roommates and your work and everything's squared away. It's a really good way to just keep track of everything. So let me know if you have any questions, if there's a scenario that you saw that was really confusing, or if there was another scenario you'd like me to go over in future videos. Let me know. I'd love to help you out with it. Thank you as much always for the kind words, the encouragement, the kind comments. I love that. It's so much fun meeting a lot of you who have scheduled Q&A calls with me or the Monarch personal tutorials. It's just been so much fun to get to know a lot of you. So really appreciate it. Thank you. Like, subscribe, and let me know what videos you guys need so I can help you as best I can.